Hi everybody, thanks for coming to the channel. I'm going to talk about, I call this every guitarist story. We all have guitars that we've owned, and we decided, well, there's some greener pasture that we wanted to kind of check out or pursue, and then, of course, finances are limited, and so we may sell that instrument that we had in pursuit of something that we think is more desirable. And so over the years, I know like I've been playing for like 50 years, and I probably own at least 50 guitars, maybe more. I've just lost track of how many over the years. And in the buying and the selling, there's certain ones that just kind of stick out that like, yeah, I should have held on to that one. And sometimes we sell them because, well, we think that there's some new guitarist that's playing something that really grabs our attention. We want to sound like that guitarist, maybe, or emulate them by having a guitar like theirs. Or there's situations like maybe the guitar that we played fell out of fashion and some new fangled thing came in that we want to try out. And so we sold the old thing, and then a few years later we kind of regret it. So the title of this one, I'm going to make a little slideshow I'm going to put up here as we go. And it's called Guitars I Have Owned and Regret Selling, Every Guitarist's Story. So I'm going to kind of go through on my iPad here and go through these. The first one I'm going to show you is a 1975 Ovation Breadwinner. Here's the story on that. I was about 16 years old. I had the opportunity to join a high school stage band, which is basically the jazz ensemble, and I needed an electric guitar. I had one that I had gotten for a Christmas present from my parents from Sears Roebuck. If you remember those that came in the catalog, and this one looked kind of like an SG, but it wasn't any kind of quality enough that I would be able to go and play with a real band. And the amp was some little 2.5 watt solid state thing that really didn't sound very good. And so I went to the local music store with my Sears Roebuck guitar and amp, see if I could get a trade-in and maybe get something. And what I had in mind to get was what's called a copycat. There was a brand back in the mid-70s that was called Copycat, and they made lawsuit era copies of like Telecasters, Stratocasters, Les Pauls, SGs, you name it, whatever was a popular guitar at the time. They usually had some kind of thing that kind of ripped off the design, and eventually I don't know whatever happened to them. They went out of business, or they became something else, or got bought up by some factory in China or something. And most of these were probably made in Japan. They weren't really bad guitars, but they cost a whole lot less, and of course they weren't real Fenders and Gibsons and things. And so I had planned on going to the music store to buy. There was a white Telecaster copycat that was in there. And the reason I wanted the Telecaster because my favorite guitarist at the time, Terry Kath, the lead guitarist for Chicago, the original guitarist, he played one. When I'd seen them in concert, he had this kind of heavily modified Telecaster that he had stickers on and things. It's a pretty famous guitar now. And I go in there with this idea, and the salesman, it's almost like a car dealer kind of, oh no, you don't want that guitar, you want this one. And he shows me this Ovation Breadwinner. This was a very non-traditional looking guitar. It had a body that looked like an axe. And I really didn't know that much about guitar design and everything, but it played better than what I had, and it was in a price range I could probably afford on my part-time after-school job. And the guy offered to make me a deal. He says he could sell me that guitar and then the nice hard shell case for just around $500 or so, and then then sell me an amp too. And basically the whole package came into just under $1,000, and that's what I started on. And the Ovation Breadwinner, it was not a guitar that was like really super popular. They made them for several years and they kind of went out of fashion. I think Ace Frehley of Kiss played one for a while just because it looked like an axe. The axe-shaped body was actually very ergonomically designed. It was super comfortable to hold, very well balanced. You could hold it seated, standing. You could prop it on your leg like a classical guitar. It sat really well and played well. It had some extraordinarily high-quality components, which I didn't know enough about it to appreciate at the time. It had an ebony fretboard, which you never see guitars. I mean, the top-of-the-line Gibsons back in the day had ebony fretboards. There's my dog again coming to open up the door. Close this back a second. There we go. And hello, puppy. And so the thing also had active electronics, so you could make all kinds of sounds but it was different than any other guitar that you'd ever see in the time. For example, like tone controls on it with the active electronics. The midpoint or neutral point was actually in the middle. It was like 5. If you rolled up the treble, well, this thing boosted the treble to god awful levels. I mean, enough that it was actually shrill and kind of strident. And if you rolled it to the bass side, it didn't just muffle the highs like most guitars do. This thing boosted the bass where it became really, really super bassy and super heavy. It had it had brass bridges, which was kind of a new thing at the time. It was a trending kind of thing. It only had 2 knobs and 2 switches, and it had like phase switches and like a mid-range kind of control. And you could approximate the sounds of a lot of guitars with it, but you couldn't quite nail the sound. And there's certain sounds like there's that like one of my favorite sounds is that, you know, the middle position on a Telecaster, that's kind of snarl you get between the treble and the bass and the bridge pickup. And the same thing with the Les Paul. So you couldn't get anything really close to approximating that. And it had some sounds that were just flat out not useful at all. But at the same time, it did have some really innovative things, and the quality of the guitar was overall really astounding. But nobody played them. I think the only people who played them was the Partridge Family, if you're old enough to remember that TV show. So nobody cool was playing them. And it was like, as the 80s came in, you started switching over to these Ibanez shred machines or something else, and I was like, well, okay, well, maybe I want to trade this thing off. And so I ended up trading it off. My amp that I had was an EMC S300. This thing was 165 solid state watts of loud. I'd never played an amp. I even had a Marshall one time. I didn't even touch this thing for loudness. This thing would make your pant legs wave in the breeze. It was like really, really loud. So that with a Maestro fuzz pedal and that guitar that you could crank up the active bass on the thing and make this guitar the heaviest sounding guitar. We did some Black Sabbath tunes and covers and stuff, and it was like, I mean, it sounded so heavy. You know, death metal and stuff was not to happen for another 30 years or something, but this thing could create the sound of doom. It was pretty amazing. But it was a pretty versatile instrument for jazz, and you could get a pretty good archtop kind of sound out of it. It was quite often I've strung it up with flat wounds. But I ended up selling it, and oh well, what the heck? So it went on its way. The next guitar one I had to get rid of, and I've got a whole another video on the channel about this one, the story behind this one. This was 1975 Ovation Balladeer. I bought the thing to match my white Breadwinner. The necks on them were almost identical. They played great, sounds beautiful. This is an instrument just like that one. But I had to sell this one. That one, as you'll see the video on the channel here about this one, I had to sell it to feed my family one time when I was a young airman in the Air Force. And eventually, this year, this instrument showed up in my local guitar center, and I went and snagged it. And this is like my favorite guitar out of all my collection out. This is the one that's got the most emotional pull to me. But this 1975 Ovation Balladeer, I missed this guitar for, from 1983 to 2023 when I got rid of it the first time there. So I was so glad to get this thing back. But I'll show you a slide here, and you can see a geeky picture of me holding it. A friend took the picture over at his house, and but that was me at about 15, 16, playing this. The next one I had with my graduation money, my parents gave me. I bought a Fender P-Bass fretless, about a 1976. And that was a really sweet instrument. I enjoyed playing fretless bass. I still enjoy playing fretless bass today. I have 6 basses, none of them particularly expensive. But back then in the day, Fender bass was considered to be just kind of a plank. I mean, there's really nothing. You think about a P bass, there's nothing super technical about them. It's a slab of wood for a body and a slab of wood for the neck with one pickup, a volume and a tone control. They sold with a hard shell case for $375. You couldn't touch this bass for anything close to $3,000 nowadays. And so it's one of those things. I actually had, if you look in the picture that I'm showing here, this amp behind you, this is the SG Systems. It's made by CMI, Chicago Musical Instruments. They were partnered with Gibson at the time. And I think Standell Amps had a part of it that basically helped design the amps. It was an all-tube amp, and it was sounded really great. But the amp went on the fritz with me, and I had to get some money to fix the amp for a band I was playing with, and so I ended up selling the P-Bass. So $375 at the time. I probably sold it for $275, and if I had it today, it'd be worth about $3,500. This one's a heartbreaker. I bought a '76 Jazzmaster right before I graduated. I traded in a couple of guitars and I bought this thing just because I thought it was really cool. And at the time, it was the most expensive guitar that Fender sold. With a hard shell case, it cost $675, which seemed to be a substantial amount of money back in the day, back in 76, 77 or so. I bought it in 77. I discovered that the Jazzmaster is one of the most annoying guitars that there ever was. The bridge sits on these little, just pointy little screws. That's how they set it up. You use an Allen wrench and it sits in these little carved out little metal holes in the. It doesn't fit tight. It just rocks back and forth in there. It was easy to knock the bridge loose, to have it go completely not intonated. The saddles, the two little feet that you screw down like on a Telecaster or on a Strat, to raise and lower your individual string saddles. Well, they would just unscrew themselves. If you didn't put Loctite on them or something, you'd be playing and they would just go down. So the next thing you know, you're buzzing against the frets. You're at a gig and you're having to do this. So anyway, it ended up being a super annoying guitar. The tremolo is almost impossible to play. Although sound-wise, this thing is a total funk machine. If you're playing funk or disco or that kind of stuff, man, this thing's got a sound that really works well for that. But the instrument, I played it for a while, and again, this is by the early '80s. I'm like, okay, yeah, let me just sell this thing, maybe get something else, and so I sold it. Again, I probably sold it for a fraction of what I paid for it. I don't remember now, but gosh, it was back in the early early 2000s. I was surfing on eBay one time, and my Jazzmaster was like this one in the picture. It had the block inlays, which was kind of a rare thing. The bound neck, that's different from some of the others, more standard Jazzmasters. And I saw one just like this, and it was selling on eBay for $7,700. I was like, oof, I could have been gut punched. And so I really regret selling the Jazzmaster. You couldn't have bought. I mean, you could have gone to any pawn shop in the United States and found a Jazzmaster and bought it for under $200. What happened? Kurt Cobain came along. Kurt Cobain comes along playing the Jaguar and with the offset body, and people started snapping up Jazzmasters and Jaguars out of pawn shops, and all of a sudden they became rare. They became collectible. And before that, you couldn't give them away. But you never know. If I had known that when I was a kid, I would have probably hung onto that guitar. But live and learn. In the late '90s, I had a Carvin double neck like this one here. 17 pounds of solid maple. Gave me back problems. Playing 4 or 5 hour gigs with this thing on your shoulder, it was like oof. Started getting chiropractic issues. But man, it had a sound. It had the 22 pole piece pickups that Carvin was known for. And the cool thing about that is when you bend strings, there's no dead spots. Normally when you're bending a string, the string is going away from the magnet, and so you're losing volume. With the 22 pole pieces, you've always got a pole piece under where your string is, and so you could do these just luscious boomer bends on there that were full and just really, really slick. Ebony fingerboard on the thing. The Carvin action was just excellent. That's one of the things that they really advertised. And Carvin sold direct. I bought this used from a music store in Germany and played it for several years. And then eventually I traded it for something altogether different, which I'll go to. But this is one of those things that, if you've heard my song Leviathan, which is here on the channel, the original recording, the original home studio demo on a 4-track was recorded with the electric 12-string part of this one and the 6-string neck for the solo. Several years later, I got a guild. I was performing mostly acoustic stuff with this fellow here. This is Pat Mundy. He and I played together as a acoustic act, doing acoustic guitar and tabla drums. We did some very cool, intricate music on my album Orion Ascending. You'll hear a couple of songs in there that we recorded together. That was that's the kind of music that we were playing at the time. But that's my Guild D412. That was a really nice 12-string. That's the 12-string I used on my album Orion Ascending, as for the acoustic tunes on there. Nice instrument. This one, there's a music store I was working in that was managing at the time, and one night the heat, the thermostat, this is up in Alaska. Alaska's pretty cold and dry in the wintertime, and one night the heat got stuck in the on position and ran all night long. Came in the morning, it was almost 100 degrees in the store, and it cracked like the soundboard of a piano. It was like really, that was a big loss there, and it cracked the soundboard on my Guild. So the Guild I played for several years, but I ended up selling it away. But I still miss it because it had a sound that was very unique. The neck was just as perfect as you can get on a 12-string. I have a Guild behind me here now that I play, which sounds very close to it, but this American-made Guild was really exceptional. I've owned 2 Gibson Mark Series guitars over the years. When I lived in Colorado, to replace the guitar like this that I sold, I was a few years without a 6-string, and I decided, okay, I'm going to take a tax return, and I finally got some money to go get me a 6-string, and I went to the pawn shop, and I was looking at an Alvarez that was in there, and the guy didn't really want to make the trade on this fancy-looking Alvarez, but he was willing to make the trade on this Gibson. The Gibson Mark Series, they were made in the mid-70s. By the mid-80s, when I bought mine, they were pretty much kind of a worthless thing. So you could pick one up for $200-300. Nobody knew what they were. Gibson built them with this basically the Kasha bracing, the asymmetrical bridge. It was just a radical design for Gibson, and had kind of the raised purfling ring similar to Ovation around it. They were just a real innovative guitar. They came in about 4 different models. There's the Mark 35, which had mahogany back and sides, a spruce top. They had the Mark 53, which is a maple back instrument, the Mark 72, which had beautiful Brazilian rosewood, and it had a really interesting neck that had a piece of, as you can see in the picture there, it had a piece of rosewood inlaid in between 2 pieces of ebony. It was a very nice playing guitar. It didn't sound like most of the Gibsons of the time, which are usually kind of bass heavy, and they're good for like singer-songwriter type stuff. This one, it was really, because of the Kasha bracing, it was very steely, very balanced across its whole range. It was a nearly perfect fingerstyle guitar. Only problem was amplifying the thing was really a real pain, because you couldn't put a sound hole pickup in it because of this purfling ring. I never liked the sound of piezo transducers, and the bracing in it was kind of weird to find a place where you could get into the bridge plate. And so trying to perform with one live was problematic. They did make some factory ones that had what they call Barkus Berry hot dots in them, but mine didn't have that. And so I played it for a long time, and this is on my songs on the Orion Ascending album, like what was the one, Hearts of the Fathers, and there's a couple others on there, 6-string ones. Simple Things is recorded on this instrument, and so it had a really great sound, but but I ended up selling it. And then years later, I had a chance to get another one, and I actually traded a guy a guitar to get one, and then I kept it for a few years and I traded it away again. So it's one that, although I miss it because it did have a very specific, unique sound, it's the one that I can live without. But it's like it really sounded very good, and one of the best Gibsons I ever played. And there's a picture of me in my really loud pants in the mid-90s playing that at a festival. Now, I said I got rid of my double neck, my Carvin double neck. This is what I traded for it. This is the 1985 Roland G707 and the GR700 foot controller. This was Roland's attempt at guitar synthesis. It had basically a body that was made by Ibanez, I believe, 2 humbucking pickups, and it had the synth controls on the guitar itself that you could use to change your filters and waveforms and things. And then you had the pedal board where you had, I think it had 64 banks of sounds, and you then had another, like a module you could use to add another 64. I think these sold for around $3 or $4 grand back in the day. So this was a pretty good trade. I mean, it was a good trade up. And I played with this for a while, performed with it, and it was some looping type things, sort of doing this sort of Robert Frippertronics type deal. And there's the picture of me that was kind of photoshopped there with the thing. This was in the period when I had released Orion Ascending. On the album there, it makes an appearance on the title song Orion Ascending, and also the song Reflected Light is just this instrument solo. Which is pretty neat. It did have its issues, though. Guitar synthesis was not a real good thing. Digital electronics was really slow. This is sort of a digitally controlled analog synth, I guess is the best way to describe it. And pitch to voltage conversion, where you have a pickup down underneath the bridge pickup that basically it's a pickup that has 6 elements in it, and it sends the output of each string to a digital like a pitch to voltage converter, and that process was pretty slow back in the day. And so as you're playing, there'd be a noticeable lag from the time you pick the string till the time a sound would come out, especially on the lower frequencies, on the lower strings. And then some things just don't convert. For example, like you do a pick squeal, or you hit the string with the edge of your pick. What would happen is that this thing would, rather than just not make a sound at all, it would just, oh, let's just pick a note, any note. It wouldn't be in the key. It would just be some random note that it would just select to fill in the blank note. So you'd be playing along. It would happen. It would come out of just nowhere, like the guitar just, got shot or something. So it was, but it was, for what it was a pretty interesting tool. I did, I modified mine heavily. I put a DiMarzio Super Distortion in the bridge, and I had the neck scalloped on it. And so the scalloped neck with guitar synthesis was very, very interesting. So it was a kind of a cool thing. I missed this one sometimes. It's not hugely regretted this one, but it was a fun instrument to play. Oh, and the cable that connected this thing to the cable was like this big giant, looked like something that would go to like a mid-90s server room. It was like a 50-pin cable. The cable probably weighed 5 pounds just by itself. It was a beast. Okay, the last one of the whole bunch I'm going to share with you today. When I was about 18, 19, I was hoping for a career in music. That's what I wanted to be, is like a Leo Kottke style, on the road performing solo 12-string guitarist. And I needed a custom 12-string that would do the things that I wanted it to do. So I designed one on paper, and I sent a design to John Graven. John Graven was from Nashville, Indiana. He built some of those beautiful instruments. Mary Chapin Carpenter is known for playing them. John Denver had one that he was famous for. Mine was a one of a kind. It was the custom DX, but we modified it heavily. It had a 2-inch wide neck instead of 1 7/8 inches. It had alpine spruce top, beautiful, beautiful figured maple. I mean, some of those pretty maple back and sides you'd ever see. It had a mahogany neck, so it looked off from the back almost like a Gibson L5 or something like that. Just the natural finish and the naturally finished mahogany. And this picture doesn't do it justice, but I don't have a better picture of it available. It had, in the headstock, it had the White Lady design, but we modified the White Lady design. And with the White Lady, we made it Galadriel from Lord of the Rings. And so there's the Elven Princess, and you see her little pointy little ears, and behind her is like this crescent moon, and between the points of the crescent moon is the star of Elendil. And so, on the neck, it had little mushrooms, and position markers were little hobbits. They were like really, really awesome looking. It was a very, very special instrument. Humongous sound. It sounded like a piano in your lap. The bass notes on this thing would rattle your teeth. However, this instrument had some issues, and it took me years to find. And by this point, I got so frustrated with it, I eventually just traded it. And what the issue was is John Graven, as great a luthier as he was, he measured wrong. He measured the bridge wrong. The bridge slot was in the wrong place. And I had intonation problems with that guitar from day one. I sent it to him twice to have the neck reset. He tried some different weird little fixes and stuff to the bridge. Never came, but if it turns out that he just when he routed the slot for it was off. So the thing never did play quite right. So as nice a guitar as that was, as huge and beautiful a sound as it had, it was just a constant annoyance to me. And so I played it for about 15 years. It was a road worn, and it was pretty rugged. There's places where the finish was starting to wear off from me playing with finger picks and things, but it had a good long life on it. And so I sold that to somebody and traded it off for something. I don't remember what now. I bought it for $900, which seemed like to be a fortune at the time. I ordered it in 1978, I think, maybe 1979. Took him 9 months to build it. That was a long time to wait for a kid who's like 18, 19 years old. And then when I sold it, I think I actually traded it. I think I traded it for something. And when At that point, I figured, well, I spent $900 on it. It had 15 years. I think it's worn all, beaten up, and everything. It's probably worth maybe $450, $500, maybe a little more, maybe close to $600 or $700. But nobody would ever give you that much for it, for that instrument. And then John Craven died. And if I had this instrument today, it'd probably be upwards of around $9,000 or $10,000. So you never know how these things. That's why I kind of hang on to everything nowadays. I've got some cheapies in here that someday might actually be valuable, a lot more valuable than what they might turn out to have been otherwise. Somebody decides they're going to go play a Cozart someday. it might be the one I bought for $66 might be $6,600. You just never know. If you wouldn't have thought a jazz master would go for $7,000, or or a guitar that you had for bought enough for $900 would go for $9,000. So you just never know what's going to happen with them. So anyway, I've rambled on for long enough. I hope this takes you down a little bit down memory lane. In the comments, if you have had a guitar that you loved and lost, or maybe that you played to death and then you decided, oh, it's time for something new, and then you kicked yourself for selling it. What are the ones that got away, or what are the ones that you regret letting go of? Put that in the comment. I think it'd be a fun discussion to have. Thanks for watching the channel today, and I'll finish off here, and wish you a good week, and catch you next time. Like, subscribe, and share. See ya. Bye.